Hello, and thank you for joining Helaman's Army today. You know, I was intended to move on to Joseph F. Smith and his discussion of consecration, socialism, communism, whatever things that he discussed. And as I began to research this, and as I began to fall into this, I realized, what in the tithing is happening here? This is crazy. Okay, it's not crazy, but this was a big historical moment where I realized that I needed to go back and review some of the things from the past, talk about some of the things from the past, and decide why in the world we made this change from this United Order consecration concept to tithing. But before I dive into this, I want to make it clear that I believe that what we're seeing here, what we saw in the early churches, I think we're seeing the growing up of the church. I think what we saw in the beginning was when we're infant, the infant church, the adolescent church, toddler adolescent church, and then finally getting into the teenage years and finally young adulthood. I think that's what we saw with the church. And so as I was going through this, that was kind of the impression that I got, is that that there were some revelations given, some commandments given, and it was that they were not well understood, that as we jumped into them as a church at a young age, that the church really didn't quite grasp the way to implement everything. If you read all of the revelations, there's not a lot of nitty-gritty, here's how you do it, detail stuff. It's very, very high level, extremely high level. And so there's not a lot of direction on here's how you will implement this commandment, or here's how you'll make this work. It's just hey, go do this. That's how God works. If we remember the brother of Jared, and God said, hey, go figure out a way to bring light into your boats, and he went out and said, okay, well, if you touch all these rocks, then we'll have the light up, and we'll have light in there. And I think this is the same kind of concept, that God said, go do this. You guys need to go make this happen. Care for the poor and the needy. And he didn't give us a lot of direction on how that happens. So I think that's where this all came in and all came down to. So I'm going to start with a conference report given, or a conference talk out of the conference report of 1899, October of 1899, given by Joseph F. Smith. And it's interesting, Joseph F. Smith only talked about consecration like a couple of times. He only uses the word consecrate or consecration in 2 separate general conference talks. That's it. That's all he talked about it. He never mentions the word socialism and never mentions the word communism. He stayed far away from those. Matter of fact, as I was searching through things, I was having a difficult time even finding anything that mentions the United Order with Joseph F. Smith. So this is a really big departure from what we've seen in the past with previous presidents of the church. But so onto this general conference talk. So in this general conference talk, he discussed, and I'm not going to go through this whole talk. I don't have time for that in this video. I'm going to give you links to everything, and I'm going to encourage everybody to read all of the links I give you, because I really have a lot of material to cover in this video. Because it's just history. It's not straight history, but there's a lot of history in this video. But in this talk, he discusses the objects of the law of tithing, the same law in ancient times, the duty of the leaders of the church in relation to it, and the disastrous effects of neglect and beneficent results of obedience. Okay, so what happens? That we have the law of tithing. It's been the same law that's always been. It's the duty of the church leaders to help enforce it, or help encourage it. I guess enforce it's the wrong word. Encourage it. And then the effects of when we choose to follow it or choose not to follow it. And I'm not going to read the whole talk, but there are some, as you can already tell, there's some quotes that are highlighted that I'm going to talk about. And I actually need to, I said something in a couple of other previous videos that turns out to be wrong, and so I need to be like, well, whoops, that's on me. These videos are not in any way they're not the statements from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm just a guy who's trying to understand this and sharing it with other people, so that as you go through my study from beginning through it, that you can also come to an understanding, hopefully, in a similar fashion. Anyhow, I'll show you when I get to that quote. I'll read it and I'll show you. So the one here in red: we have had much valuable instruction in relation to our duties as Latter-day Saints, not only concerning the law of tithing, but also in reference to other things which are as important in their place as the law of tithing. There is nothing, however, of greater importance to the welfare of the church at present than the consideration of this law, by which means will be placed in the storehouse of the Lord to meet the necessities of the people. So, in this kind of time period, in 1899, the church really starts pushing tithing as opposed to consecration. And there's a reason for this. As we'll find out later as we go through these historical documents, we'll find that the church was in debt. And so all of a sudden they're like, well, we got to figure out a way to do this. So it was very clear that that Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, Wilford, Woodruff, they all, not so much John Taylor, and you'll hear it in when we get to it, but it wasn't really super. There wasn't a hard fast standard like it was given by President Joseph F. Smith. You'll find that it was they very much were like, hey, look, it's voluntary, and tithing still is voluntary, really. Yes, it's connected to the temple in your temple recommend, but it still is voluntary. Tithing is voluntary. The consequence is that you don't get the benefits of and the blessings of the temple if you choose not to pay it, and that's on you. There's a choice and there's a reward for it, and it's up to you on what you want, which is how all of the commandments of God function, and tithing specifically. But there's a great importance that they start pushing this. So on to the green quote. It says, here is one of the great purposes for which the law of tithing is instituted in the church. It is intended that the widows shall be looked after when they are in need, and that the fatherless and the orphan shall be provided for from the funds of the church, that they shall be clothed and fed, and shall have opportunity for education, the same as other children who have parents to look after them. All right, so this harkens back to the law of consecration. But if you recall the law of tithing from Malachi, where have you robbed me? In tithes and offerings. So here we see Joseph F. Smith. He's still, the church itself is still kind of grappling with this. How do we fund the church and also care for the poor and the needy? And that's really what this comes down to. And so the way I see it, at this point in the church, we're exiting this adolescent stage and entering into the teenager, young adult stage, where we're deciding that, hey, look, we got to figure this out for ourselves. And so he says, well, everything comes out of the tithing funds. It's all tithing. Everything needs to be coming out of the tithing funds. The way we understand it now is a little different than this, but this is just the church trying to grapple with and understand how we do things, and we learn through experience. And so a lot of the times we'll be given a commandment, or we'll be given some admonition, or we'll be given some, hey, you really should do this type stuff. And it really comes down to, if we follow it and we do it, then we learn from it and we grow from it and we increase from it. And anyone who's had the faith to pay tithing when there is nothing to pay tithing on, or at least it feels like there's nothing to pay tithing on, can attest to the value of doing so. And so, but this, in my opinion, this is right where we're at in this, is that President Joseph F. Smith is trying to figure out, and by the way, at this time in 1899, Joseph F. Smith is not the president of the church, but he is the president of the Quorum of the 12. And it was Lorenzo Snow was also talking about tithing, which we'll get to in a little bit. But this was a big talk, and it was all about tithing, the whole thing. Matter of fact, I already skipped one whole page. We're going to skip another whole page. And here's where I need to say, in one video I said, hey, that seems silly. It doesn't make sense to me. It just seems like a silly thing. Well, I'm wrong. So this whole concept of, hey, we couldn't live the law of consecration, therefore God gave us tithing, even though it was already given to us, even though it was already on the books, it was already a commandment. This was Joseph F. Smith that stated that. So, and he says, and I want to tell you that this refers directly to the law of tithing. Previously, he's talking about in the book of, not Ezra, where he's discussing Ezra, and he's talking about the priests and the children of Habiah, and the children of Kaz. And so, and he basically says, hey, this has to do with the law of tithing. And I want to tell you that this refers directly to the law of tithing. In the first place, it referred to the law of consecration. But that law, as has been explained, was not properly kept. And inasmuch as people are under greater condemnation when they keep not the laws that they are given them, the Lord in his mercy withdrew from the Latter-day Saints the law of consecration, because the people were not prepared to live it. And as long as it was in force and they kept it not, they were under condemnation. The law of tithing was given in its place. This is directly from President Joseph F. Smith in 1899, October General Conference. So, how do we unwrap this? Because I still go to the temple, and when I make a covenant, the law of consecration is still in there. It has not been taken away from me. So how do I match this up? And like I said at the beginning, I think this is because the church is learning to understand and learning to grapple with what is tithing for, and what is the law of consecration, and how do we make this work. And so this is kind of where things are at. And like I said, this talk goes on and on. It is a long talk. It's highly worth reading. I'm going to send it, or I'll have a link in the description. Please go read it. It is absolutely worth your time to read. But it's also, it gave me a lot of questions. And so I started to search. The Joseph F. Smith put me, like I said, into this historical rabbit hole. And I said, okay, well, what is the history of tithing? Why is it that tithing wasn't the thing up front? Why didn't we start with tithing and build on it? Because as we know that tithing is a preparatory law that prepares us for the law of consecration. Tithing and sacrifice both are a preparatory law which prepare us for the law of consecration. So what happened? So I got to searching, and I searched and searched and searched, and I went through looking for the history of the law of consecration and for the history of tithing. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the blogs and information out there that cover the law of tithing and the history of tithing is on anti-Mormon websites, very clearly not excited about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, and to be honest, a lot of their sources were non-existent. They couldn't be found. They were just in a lot of cases just not even referenced. And so I'm not comfortable sharing, first of all, from a website that hates the church. I don't support those who hate me. And then two, I'm not comfortable with sharing stuff that I can't pull up the source. So it took me a while to find it, but I finally found a reference that actually not only does a pretty good job of sourcing everything, although they don't provide links. They just tell you where they got it, which is fine. That works. But it also is not it's it's fairly it is a very pro LDS website, but the brief history of tithing that they do is not is very neutral, and it's not anti-Mormon whatever. So, like I'm going to be upset because the church is trying to grapple with the law of tithing and the law of consecration and how they work. So this I'm going to give a link to this website as well, to the Talking Scripture website that discusses a brief history of tithing. There are some things in here which I think are fantastic. One thing that I have made clear from the beginning is that tithing is a subset of the law of consecration. In other words, you cannot live the law of consecration without living the law of tithing. That when you start living the law of consecration, the law of tithing does not get dismissed and thrown out. The law of tithing is a very important part of consecration. So here we go. When this revelation was received, the church members saw the law of tithing not as an inferior commandment to the law of consecration, but as another iteration of it. And his reference is, he's got a book. I don't have access to that book, but that's his reference, is right there. Lyndon W. Cook, Joseph Smith, and the Law of Consecration. It was published in 1985, and it's on page 77. As the church grew and went west, the saints came to learn and live the law of tithing as currently constituted. It took them a while, which we'll get to. The Lord commanded that we live this law, but once again, he did not give a blueprint on how we should implement this will. This is something which I've stated. He said, hey, go do it, but he didn't tell us how. So this is something we'll see throughout his dealings with his children. He gives commands, but leaves mortals up to figure out how to do his will. We see this throughout Scripture and history. This is evidence that the church is both human and divine, a delicate dance between the blessings and the will of the Lord as implemented by his fallen children in a fallen world. His reference on that is Clay and Gold, Inspiration and Carnation. It's at the bottom of this page too. He's got all of his references. Okay, so initially, tithing was seen as 10% of your interest, which I think is an interesting statement. So what is 10% of your interest? Is it 10% of your holdings every year? Is it 10% of your increase in your interest? In other words, I put money in my savings account and I have $1 at the end of the year in interest, so I pay 10 cents in tithing. Is that what the interest is? It's still fairly vague. So in 1837, let's go back a little bit. The presiding bishopric defined tithing as 2% of one's net worth after deducting debts. Okay. So a lot of folks, your net worth, right? So that's your total overall value, which could be pretty hard to pay depending on how much you owe or don't owe. And that's a pretty, that could get pretty intricate. In 1844, there was an official proclamation for all saints to immediately pay a one-time tithe of 1/10 of their property in money to the church. Exemptions were not paid for those who paid at a conversion. So there is a revelation given by Joseph Smith in 1838. So I'm going to go to the Joseph Smith papers quite quickly here. And this was the revelation given July 8th, 1838. Question, O Lord, show unto thy servants how much thou requirest of thy properties for the people for a tithing. Answer, verily thus saith the Lord, I require all their surplus property to be put into the hands of the bishop of my church of Zion, for the building of mine house, and for the laying of the foundation of Zion, and for the priesthood, and for the debts of the presidency of my church. And this shall be the beginning of the tithing of my people. And after that, those who have thus been tithed shall pay 1/10 of all their interest annually. And this shall be a standing law unto them forever for my holy priesthood, saith the Lord. Verily I say unto you, it shall come to pass that all those who gather unto the land of Zion shall be tithed of their surplus properties, and shall observe this law, or they shall not be found worthy to abide among you. And behold, I say unto you, if my people observe not this law to keep it holy, and by this law sanctify the land of Zion unto me, that my statutes and my judgments may be kept thereon, it may be most holy. And behold, verily I say unto you, it shall not be a land of Zion unto you, and this shall be an ensample unto all the stakes of Zion. Even so, amen. So this should be section 119. So it's interesting because you're paying tithing on what you owe completely, and then after that it's the interest of all their interest annually. So interest isn't well defined. It's not the interests that you had over the year. Is it the increase of those interests? It's really not well defined. And so for those of us, for Latter-day Saints that are out there splitting hairs and saying, well, yeah, here's a reason for me to not pay more. It really doesn't, there's a spirit of the law, and then there's the letter of the law. And a lot of folks will stick with the letter of the law and ignore the spirit of the law just so they can say, look, I did it. So this one is, if you're following the spirit of this law, as it's defined here, it's really should provide a pretty good income for the church. So there's a couple other things that I'm going to talk about specifically in Talking Scripture, but I'm going to step aside from that for now, and I'm going to head to a church resource, which I prefer. Tithing. In the early years of the church, leaders sought to fund important projects such as the publication of scriptures and the construction of the Kirtland Temple through donations, business ventures, and other fundraising efforts. By July 1838, which is where we found the revelation, questions arose about the best way to meet the church's financial needs and the role donated to funds should play. And this, I believe, is that's a letter from Thomas B. Marsh. Let's keep going. On July 8th, church leaders in Far West met together and petitioned the Lord to show unto thy servants how much thou requirest of the properties of thy people for a tithing. All right. Now, this was what I just read to you, this revelation from 1838. It's in Doctrine and Covenants, section 119. And also I read directly from the Joseph Smith papers. That's the original source. So Joseph Smith received 2 revelations about how much should be required and how the funds should be administered. Before this time, the words tithe and tithing, as used in the church, referred to any voluntary offering, regardless of the amount. Okay, so I just want to point this out. Any voluntary offering, regardless of the amount. This is generally, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, but this is generally, as described to me by other Protestant Christian churches or adherents to those Christian churches, that this is what they do. Any voluntary offering regardless of the amount. And I'm not going to get into that too much because I've had a lot of people argue with me about paying tithing, that you shouldn't pay tithing because it can't get you into heaven. And I'm like, well, that's not why you pay tithing. Anyway, so the words tithe and tithing were a voluntary offering. It still is a voluntary offering, but there was no statement on the amount. But after the 1831 revelation to Joseph Smith on consecration and stewardship, saints in Missouri and Ohio donated surplus goods, parcels of land, tools, furniture, and sometimes cash. The church's system for administrating donated resources varied. Sometimes the bishop used funds to purchase land or assist the poor and needy for projects such as constructing buildings and printing church literature. The United Firm or the High Council managed donated funds. So then he gives the revelation in 1838, and so they started to have a little bit of income. So I'm going to move away from this one for just a moment and move to, matter of fact, I'm actually going to hide my web browser from you for just a moment because I did not sign in, and I need to sign in so that you can see what I've highlighted, so I don't read the whole thing, because I don't want to read the whole thing and waste everyone's time on reading it, but I also don't want you to see my password. So, signing in we are. Signing in there and signing in on this one. Okay. So we're going to go to, let me pull that web browser back up. We're going to go to, this is Teachings of the Presidents of the Church, Joseph F. Smith, and this is chapter 31, Obedience to the Law of Tithing. So like I said, I don't want to talk about this whole thing, but it gives a nice little update or an information about the debt. So at the end of the 1800s, the church faced a staggering financial debt exceeding $1 million. This financial obligation weighed heavily on Joseph F. Smith's mind. At the October 1899 General Conference, which I just showed you, and there's a link to it in the description, we have had much valuable instruction in relation to our duties as Latter-day Saints, not only concerning the law of tithing, but also in reference to other things which are as important in their place as the law of tithing. There is nothing, however, of greater importance to the welfare of the church at present than the consideration of this law, by which means it will be placed into the storehouse of the Lord to meet the necessities of the people. So one afternoon, 7 years later, so it would have been 1906, one afternoon, 7 years later, President Smith came from his office and found his daughter Rachel in the front hall of the Beehive House. "Where's your mother?" he inquired. "I don't know." "Where could she be?" "I don't know." That sounds like my kids. I don't know. "When will she be here?" "I don't know, Papa. I don't know much. I just got home from school." "Well, baby," he said, "I wanted your mother to be the first to know, but since you don't have anything, I will tell you." In his hand he held a piece of paper. "Do you see this paper?" "Yes, sir." "It means that the church is at last out of debt." He smiled. "So now you really know something." That's what you do when your kids say, "I don't know." You teach them something. "I don't know." "Oh, well, since you don't know anything, let me help you out there." Side quest. Okay, back to this. So I signed in. So there it is. Okay, so this is another section. Now, again, reference and link is in the description. Please go over it, read through it. It's really good. I have said, and I will repeat it here, that a man or woman who will always pay his or her tithing will never apostatize. It does not make any difference how small or how large it may be. It is a law of the Lord. It is a source of revenue for the church. It is God's requirement. And he has said that those who will not observe it are not worthy of an inheritance in Zion. No man will ever apostatize so long as he will pay his tithing. It is reasonable. Why? Because as long as he has faith to pay his tithing, he has faith in the church and in the principles of the gospel, and there is some good in him, and there is some light in him. As long as he will do this, and the tempter will not overcome him and will not lead him astray. That is a pretty awesome promise. So we saw people apostatize with the law of consecration, but with the law of tithing, those who pay their tithing, this promise is given that you're not going to apostatize. And people who do apostatize, they usually stop paying their tithing well before they do. So it's a good indicator of trouble. So why with the law of consecration did we see it? A personal opinion here. My personal opinion was that we did see that kind of stuff because sometimes people would give it all, and if you recall, as Brigham Young said, if you throw everything away and give everything away, it is of your own excitement and your own ignorance, your own getting too excited about stuff, enthusiasm. I think that's the word he used. Your own enthusiasm and your own ignorance. That might be all that was in this one. That is. So go and study this one. So Lorenzo Snow is the president of the church at this time. And so I got to find out where I'm at. So I've got to find where it talks about it. 1840s. Here we go. In 1899, this is not the right source. There's another source. I know where it is. Hold on. Okay, this is President Lorenzo Snow, Teachings of the Presidents of the Church, Lorenzo Snow. And he was the president at the time that Joseph F. Smith gave this talk. And so why did Joseph F. Smith give this talk? Why was this suddenly an issue among the brethren? I think this kind of explains it. So I have a part marked there at the bottom, which you see, but I'm actually going to start up top here. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just going to tell you what they did. Lorenzo Snow came out and he said, look, I have this feeling I need to go to St. George. I don't know why. We just got to go. So he gathered up some guys with him, and he's like, let's hit the road. Let's go to St. George. And so when he was in St. George on May 17th, 1899, he arrived in St. George, and the Lord's will was clearly manifested in his prophet. In a meeting held on May 18th, 1899, President Snow declared. Now, I'm going to talk about this later, but those dates. But for now, we're just going to go to this. It is the word of the Lord unto you, my brethren and sisters, that you should conform to that which is required of you as a people who have these glorious prospects of exaltation and glory before you. What is it? Why, it is something that has been drummed into your ears from time to time until you perhaps have got tired of hearing it. The word of the Lord to you is not anything new. It is simply this. The time has now come for every Latter-day Saint who calculates to be prepared for the future and to hold his feet strong upon a proper foundation, to do the will of the Lord and to pay his tithing in full. That is the word of the Lord to you. And it will be the word of the Lord to every settlement throughout the land of Zion. After I leave you and you get to thinking about this, you will see yourselves at the time has come when every man should stand up and pay his tithing in full. The Lord has blessed us and has had mercy upon us in the past, but there are times coming when the Lord requires us to stand up and do that which he has commanded and not leave it any longer. What I say to you in this stake of Zion, I will say to every stake of Zion that has been organized. There is no man or woman that now hears what I am saying who will feel satisfied if he or she fails to pay a full tithing. So this is when things really start to get pushed. Lorenzo Snow went down there. They find St. George's had this dramatic drought. I even think, if I recall, there's a story about J. Golden Kimball going down there and having a conversation with St. George during this drought time period. One of those funny J. Golden Kimball stories. But Lorenzo Snow, he said, hey, go down there and let's go talk to him about this. So in his previous 50 years as an apostle, President Snow had rarely mentioned the law of tithing in his sermons, and that is correct. I've searched all of them. Matter of fact, if you recall, the last video I did on Lorenzo Snow, I didn't mention it at all, because he didn't mention tithing up until like a few years before he passed away, which was 1899. So, and he talked about the law of consecration, and he talked about the United Order quite a bit. So that changed in St. George, Utah, because of the revelation he received. And he said, I never had a more perfect revelation. He later said, than the revelation I received on the subject of tithing. From St. George, he and his traveling companions went from town to town in southern Utah, and on their way home to Salt Lake City, holding 24 meetings. President Snow delivered 26 sermons. Each time he spoke, he counseled the saints to obey the law of tithing. So I'm going to go back up and look for sources. Okay, so this source here on this big yellow part, I decided to try to find the original source. And I'm going to just complain just a minute. So if you go to the BYU library, it's in the the Millennial Star or the Deseret Evening News, May 17th, 1899 and May 18th, 1899. So the Millennial Star, I couldn't find the 1899. And the Deseret News on the BYU website stops at 1898. Frustration. I found it on the University of Utah website, but it's so blurry, you can't read what it says. President Snow and sunny St. George, right there, right smack dab in the middle. But it's such a low resolution. It's nothing but blurry. So that was frustrating. So I finally found it on the Library of Congress. Here we are, Library of Congress. So Sonny St. George, here he is, and he talks. It's really just a narrative. It doesn't say what he says much about, except at the end, where he just says, "Hey, we need to go pay our tithing." And then in the May 18th, it's a fairly short thing, but I ran across this little thing that I thought was kind of funny. I'm going to take a little sidestep here and come back to the law of tithing. So to convert the Mormons, the plan was being pushed by Dr. Wishart and others at St. George. Special per Deseret Telegraph. St. George, May 18th. The move that was conceived by anti-Mormons a short time ago to convert the Mormons is under full way here in St. George. Their plan was elaborately explained in an editorial in the news about 2 weeks ago. Mr. Wishart, Presbyterian bishop, accompanied by Mr. Martin, Mr. Toyson, and 5 or 6 ladies are here. They have a tent 50 by 24 feet in which they hold 3 or 4 meetings and Bible classes each day. They intend writing most all the settlements in Mr. Wishart's field, Utah, Idaho, and Montana, remaining about 2 weeks in each place. So they're going to go convert all the Mormons. We see this today. Yeah, if you're still trying to convert the Mormons, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it hasn't changed in 200 years. Let's maybe we should move on. An idea. Okay. So this one in 1899, I don't believe I actually got to the page. I got distracted by that one. But President Snow and the Little Folks. So it's really, again, just another narrative about how he went and said hello to everybody. He actually went and wished everyone. He wanted to shake everyone's hands. And he apparently he shook a lot of people's hands and talked to everybody, which is really cool. So, but again, it doesn't talk about the revelation or the sermon that he gave in this Deseret Evening News. But I thought it was interesting, certainly interesting to look at a source showing that yes, he really was there. Okay, so how did we get to this point? Where we are at today, I think there's a couple other things in this is the Lorenzo Snow teachings of the presidents. There were some really cool things in here that I just wanted to point out. Here in pink, purple, whatever this is, he knew that through continued obedience to this law, the blessings of the Almighty would be poured out upon this people, and the church would progress with force and rapidity that had never been experienced before. I don't think this has changed. Honestly, I think the more I realize that the closer we get to consecration, the more we get to personal consecration and family consecration, the more this is true. Tithing is a step. It is a big building block in that, but this is true. The better we are at this, the more consecrated we become, the church will progress with a force and rapidity that we have never experienced before. So President Snow had repeatedly assured the saints that they would be blessed individually, both temporally and spiritually, as they obeyed the law of tithing. So I can say personally in my own life that this is 100% true. I have 100% a testimony of this. I have seen it in my own life. That promise was partially fulfilled in August of 1899 when the people of St. George enjoyed temporary relief from their drought. Their faith was rewarded with 2.93 inches of rain, more than they had received in the previous 13 months combined. Now, southern Utah, when you suddenly receive almost 3 inches of rain, oh boy, holding it in place is pretty tough. But anyway, this next part is a part of tithing is no tithing at all. No more than immersing only half a person's body is baptism. You've got to pay a full and honest tithe. Otherwise, you're really not paying tithing. I've had this conversation online with a few folks, and quite frankly, if you don't have the faith to pay a full tithing, then oh ye of little faith is really all I have to say. Try it. Really honestly try it. And if you run into financial difficulty, then go talk to your bishop, but pay your 10%. because it will change your life. And I guarantee you that if you pay your 10% and you honestly pay your 10%, things happen. And I don't know what is going to happen in your life, but I guarantee you that if you do pay your 10% honestly, that you will not have any issues with finances. I don't know how it works. I just know it does. And this yellow one here, I want to have this principle so fixed upon our hearts that we shall never forget it. As I have said more than once, I know that the Lord will forgive the Latter-day Saints for their past negligence in paying tithing, if they will now repent and pay a conscientious tithing from this time on. And this is the same today. If you've neglected to pay tithing, just start today. What's tithing today? Pay tithing today and move on. Don't be so concerned about back paying tithing. It's just too difficult to keep up with. So pay your tithing today. The temporal salvation of this church depends on obedience to this law. And this one I think is really fascinating. Poverty exists among the Latter-day Saints and will always exist until we at least obey the law of tithing. So tithing is a foundational building block of the law of consecration. We have to at least get this down. If we get this down, then the poverty will begin to disappear among the Latter-day Saints. All right. So, and if you recall, in video number 3, where I talked about the J. Reuben Clark talk in October of 1942, I believe it was, where he discusses the United Order. He said that as we begin to set up the church welfare system, I believe that we'll be as close as we can get to the law of consecration. Basically, we're very close to living completely the law of consecration. And if you look at the church today, the church is doing very well. Financially, it's doing extremely well. Tithing is getting paid. Fast offerings are probably a little bit different. I know that in the past, I've probably not been as good at paying fast offerings. And that depends on each person. The only real direction we've given is, the amount of money that you would pay for one meal is thus the fast offering. But the more I begin to realize what consecration means, I begin to realize that in paying fast offerings, this is between you and God, and it's between you and the Lord, and it's between you and your residue or your surplus or your excess money, whatever it is, that whatever word you want to use, that really needs to be handled between you and God, and it really should be a prayerful thing. It should be something you discuss with Him, and something that you talk about with Him, and something that you share with Him, because He will give you the insight and the inspiration to do what you need to do. That's my statement on that. So, this is going to be kind of a long video, and I apologize. So, if you recall, we just talked about Lorenzo Snow basically said if you pay the law of tithing, you will not apostatize. It's pretty straightforward. Interestingly enough, in 1846, Apostle John E. Page, he left the Quorum of the 12 over what he felt was an unjust and mandatory tax. He further stated that many paid at the cost of necessities for life. So that's interesting to me, because it's tithing. It's not. It varies. The amount that we pay varies on our own personal situation. So John E. Page not only left the Quorum of the 12, but the entire church, because he didn't want to pay tithing. Remember back to Lorenzo Snow, if you pay tithing, you're not going to apostatize. Really fascinating. Interesting to see that correlation so openly. So I'm not going to go through all of this. There are two things I do want to point out. In 1881, President John Taylor instructed state presidents that church members must be tithe payers in order to have recommends for the temple. So I found in Orson Pratt talks about this in volume 15 of Discourse 45, and I had it highlighted, and there it is. And I don't want to read this all to you, but here it is. And it's in this discourse. And he's talking about the order of Enoch. He's talking about the United Order. And he said, hey, is this the law of tithing? And he's like, well, no, it's actually an inferior law or a lesser law to the order of Enoch or the United Order, or the law of consecration, which is they kind of get mixed up. But I believe that there's a slight difference between the law of consecration and the United Order, that being that the United Order is dependent upon the law of consecration, but is done on the ward level, where the law of consecration can be done on the personal level and on the family level. Anyway, so he's talking about this, and basically says that he repeats what President Taylor had said, that in order to get a temple recommend, we're going to need to pay tithing. That's what he says in this Journal of Discourses. Matter of fact, I'm going to just search specifically for recommend, if I know how to spell it. I don't know how to spell it. Let's go to the temple. 4, 5, 6. It's in here. I read it earlier. That in order to get into the temple, we need to pay this. It's in this Journal of Discourses. I'm going to leave a description in the bank. I know this is in a link in the description. I know this isn't normally how I do it, but I don't want to waste your time on this. Other than to say it is in there. And then later on, I believe, not Orson, Pratt, Wilford, Woodruff. Oh, hold on. I had him backwards. I apologize. So Wilford Woodruff, it wasn't Orson Pratt. Wilford Woodruff, in Journal of Discourses 22, Volume 22, Discourse 25, again, link in the description, he has told the bishops and presidents of stakes not to give recommends to young men or old men or anyone else who do not obey the laws of God in this respect. And I feel to back him up on this matter, for I know he will be justified before the Lord. If we attempt to please the world on one hand and serve the Lord on the other, we will fail, or we will fall. So this is just a statement that backs up this statement here on the Talking Scripture website, that's what it was. So Orson Pratt, I had those backwards. I apologize. He's talking about the order of Enoch. If I can spell. I'm an engineer. We don't know how to do that. We don't do that spelling. He really is just encouraging people to pay their tithing. That's what he's doing. Basically said, look, we're not living this law. We're not living the law of consecration. We're not living the United Order. But we need to start paying tithing, because tithing's the answer, and we have to be able to collect tithing. But it shows that basically people just really weren't paying their tithing. And this one, that's right. So this one, Orson Pratt, and this is actually listed in here, I believe. Nope, that's Orson Hyde. Things get there's so much happening. Basically, he says, this is one of the times where he says that, namely, to pay 1/10 of their annual income, to say nothing about surplus property. So that's just tithing, annual income. And that's said by Orson Pratt. So this is starts to cement the law of tithing in. Now, if we go back to the brief history of tithing, in 1910, this is where it is absolutely required for a temple recommend. It was also stated by President Taylor in 1881, but this is where it's actually put into the temple recommend questions. And the only source for this that I have found is right here. William H. Smart, who happened to have been a stake president at the time, he wrote it in his diary on the 5th of April, 1910. If you want to read that diary, it's apparently at the Marriott Library. And he was a stake president in Utah. So that's not digitized, so I haven't read the original source, but I believe that's what it is. And now I'm not going to go through the rest of the history at this point, because that's where I am at this point on this study. And well, that was a lot of information. Hopefully you caught all of it, because wow, that was a lot. Basically, this was a period of shifting from, hey, we're really not living this law of consecration, so we need to live the law of tithing. And I think that was a good move, personally, because we really were given some very generic laws, commandments. And so it's up to us as mortals to try to figure this out. And so as they began to live this in the 1800s, they found a lot of the problems with trying to live it completely and fully without being prepared to live it. And so there were quite a few folks who apostatized because they couldn't live it, and quite a few who just left the church because maybe they felt they didn't get a fair deal or whatever. But it's interesting to me, seeing all of this. It's interesting to me looking through this whole thing that there's this issue of finances that finally results in $1 million of debt that is finally paid off. In 1907, the church pulls itself out from under the bondage of its debts, which is interesting. It's like the it's like the young adult that goes, the young guy that goes out and buys himself a new sporty car because he's an adult now. And so, but we see this situation happen with the church, and I, in my personal opinion, it's because we were learning how to implement the law of consecration. Now, without saying too much about how I personally feel about it, because I'm going to get to a video in the end where I say, hey, this is, I believe, how we're to live the law of consecration today. I'm seeing that there's two things that need to happen. One is we need to pay our tithing. Which finger can you see this? We need to pay our tithing, and then two, we need to care for the poor and the needy. So the tithing gets paid. That's 10%. It's 10% for everybody across the board, and it doesn't matter how much you make. So 10% for someone who's really poor feels like a whole lot more than 10% for somebody who's completely over the top rich. Paying $1 million in tithing is a lot of money. That's a significant amount of money for me. But if you had $100 million of income for the year and you pay $1 million, that's your tithing. It was 10%. If you made, if you made 100,000 and you paid 10,000 in tithing, or if you made 10,000 and you paid 1,000 in tithing, see, the further down you go, the more impactful it becomes. But that it's the law of tithing. That's what we pay. And if we run into financial difficulty, we go see the bishop. So what's supposed to balance all that is if we run into financial difficulty, we go see the bishop. And where do those funds come from? All of those financial difficulty, caring for the poor and the needy, all of those funds come from, every single one of those funds, they come from the fast offerings. So when we begin to pay our fast offerings, or next time you go to write the check for fast offerings, or get online and click on the button for fast offerings, just think about it. How much are you paying? Is it something you notice? Is it a sacrifice? Sacrifice is one of the preparatory laws for consecration. Is it meaningful to you? Is it meaningful to God? Is it the number that you and God have worked out together and decided that this is a good number for this time around? Is that what it is? I don't know. It's between you and the Lord, and there's no specific number. I'm not going to give anyone any specific numbers by any means, but just an encouragement to make it a prayerful decision, to make it something worthwhile, because that is how we're meeting those needs. That is how we're meeting the needs of the poor and the needy, is through the fast offerings. And I can tell you that there are some wards who pay more than they take in fast offerings, and then there are other wards who pay significantly less and take more than they pay in. And I think it's interesting. Back to that Lorenzo snow, as it's starting to come put together in my mind as I'm talking about it. right back here. The church would progress. The church would progress with a force and rapidity that had never been experienced before. So if we're not only paying our tithing, but we're paying a prayerful fast offering, we're paying a consecrated fast offering, and that's another thing, by the way. I think we should consecrate the funds that we give to the church in a prayerful way. Not saying that we put a priesthood blessing on them or anything, but just simply say a prayer. Saying a prayer over tithing is super powerful. I've done that before. I have a very strong story and a very strong testimony about that. Praying over tithing is incredible. When you sit down and you pray about it and you say, God, this is what I've got to give. This is what I have for you. And these are my needs. And I'm not talking shopping list needs. I'm talking like legitimate, like, hey, I've got this thing happening and I need help with this, or I need help with that, or I just need to fill the Spirit. All of those things are needs. And when you do that, when you pray about tithing, it becomes impactful and it becomes consecrated, which is the whole point. Consecrate your efforts and your energies unto the Lord. So that's my encouragement for this video. Running a little long, I do apologize for that, but I ran into so much stuff and I uncovered so much stuff, and I realized that Joseph F. Smith was the big shift from consecration to the law of tithing. And it wasn't really Joseph F. Smith, it was really Lorenzo Snow, but Joseph F. Smith was the one who carried it through. And I really want to encourage everyone to make your tithing and your fast offerings prayerful. Pray to God about them. And you and God work it out. You determine what number it is, and you share with him your concerns, you share with him your thoughts, you share with him specific numbers. My goodness, just say, look, I did my budget and I've got this much money left over and I've got these things to take care of, and this is what I'm concerned about, and you know what's going to happen in the future. So please tell me what do I need to set aside for you? Tell me what I should consecrate unto you. And I believe that if we start doing that, and throw some wants. We have wants. It was needs and wants per the revelations in the Doctrine and Covenants concerning the law of consecration. Take care of your needs and your wants. And perhaps there you have some long-term wants and say, hey, I've got this I'd like to start saving up for. Be very specific with him about it, and he'll give you a number that is meaningful and valuable and acceptable to both you and the Lord. And I would like to encourage everyone to do that, and I do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.